Well, good morning again, everyone. Maybe I should hide the heater. We came in, yes, this worked. Actually, this feels really good. I came in without our heater system working today, and it was a balmy 54 degrees, and we're up to 57, so we may be taking off our coats very soon. Happy New Year. What an amazing year, hasn't it? Here's something I've noticed about New Year, what we do. Let's call it a repeating pattern. So not just this year, but every year I hear many people, some I know well, some people I don't know well, some people I'm overhearing conversations at the supermarket saying, "Oh, this last year was so terrible for me. I can't wait till next year. I'm so glad that this is behind us and we're going to enter into this newness." And I have, and many times, heard the same exact people a year away say this exact same thing. What a terrible year it was. These horrible things happened to my family. I can't wait for the newness of the new year. And again, I've been here a lot of years now. Same people I've heard, year 3. Oh, this was a terrible year. I think we can probably agree it's not been one of our better years. But here's the thing. Sometimes we would like to think that just turning the page on a calendar or putting a paper into the flame over here, just that act would make things different. They are symbolic acts that can have a lot behind it that can make a lot of things different. But we have to move beyond the symbolism, and much more so this year. Are you ready for it really being different? And not just saying, well, this was a terrible year, let's have a nice new year. But are you ready to do the work? Are you ready, as we talk about in a little bit of what you would like to release, are you ready to actually really do it? Are you willing to be the one that goes through fundamental inner change? Found a wonderful quote from Eric Butterworth, who was a New Thought writer. He says, "Things may happen around you, things may happen to you, but the only thing that matters are the things that happen within you." And I think we have to very seriously consider what he wrote here. So as I was, of course, this last week, I took a few days off. It's my annual staycation. Of course, where am I going to go anywhere this year anyway? And kind of a great analogy came to mind of something I experienced in the late 90s that I just thought was so spot on. So in the late 90s, or during the 90s, I was in a relationship with someone who had family in France. And so we would go pretty regularly. And it's a whole different thing going to France or Paris when you're going to visit family than just doing the touristy things. But we had a trip planned, and my partner at the time was very anxious to go because his 94-year-old grandmother was falling ill after a very full, healthy life, and he was, of course, hoping to spend what he thought would be his last visit with her. And when we got there, he called, home, one of his relatives as soon as he could, and found out that his grandmother had passed while we were on the plane. So this trip, of course, turned into something completely different in a sense. Of course, we had little day trips planned and things to do throughout France, and of course that was not what was going to happen. And so a couple days later was the funeral, and then shortly after that, a burial service. And their family's plot was about 100 miles or so from Paris. And it was not accessible by train, so we had to drive. And so they decided, the family, to rent a van. It was something like a VW van. And the next thing is that I don't quite understand how this happened, but I was volunteered to drive. First of all, my car at the time, even now, was a bit smaller than a van. And the van that they rented had a stick shift. Now, I know how to drive a stick shift, but, in an unfamiliar car and a stick shift I hadn't done in a while. And here's the next thing that I don't quite understand. Again, I think, who makes these decisions? And so I'm getting direction from the chorus in the back. I don't know, there was probably 8 or 9 people that I was driving, of how to leave Paris and get on the road to go to the family's burial plots. And again, for reasons I don't quite understand, I was directed towards the traffic circle around the Arc de Triomphe. Now, if you've not been there, you've seen this. And you know what a traffic circle is. We have our own little cute one in Haley for those that live in the valley, and you're in it for maybe 10 seconds and you're out the way. So the whole thing is, you've got this big monument, and you've got a round road and with several entrances and exits. And the whole point is that you make your way in, and you go around as long as you need to until you come to the appropriate exit. Well, needless to say, I was in that traffic circle a bit longer than I had hoped. One, I'm not familiar with this car, and it didn't have quite the zip that I'm used to, that I've got this VW van full of people, and I'm getting back seat directions in both English and French, and I don't speak French, and trying to guide me out of this mess. And in those minutes that I was there, really believing that I might as well just call in lunch because we're never going to leave. But of course, I eventually figured it out. I figured out how to work the car just right and to finagle my way into the right lane and to make the correct exit, and we were on our way. The reason why I think this vision came to me as I was sitting in one of my quiet moments, one of these mornings, is that I think 2020 is a bit like that traffic circle. How did we get there? How do we get out? There are a few exits. Will we take the right exit? And the whole thing is, part of the analogy as I was sitting there in my quiet time was that you don't get to leave the traffic circle until you've learned how to be in the traffic circle. Until you learn, I guess, the rules of the traffic circle in a sense. And as you are present in it, you start to understand of how you properly exit and get to where you would like to go. So as we talk about this new year, and we talk about leaving the previous year, let's talk about how do we really actually leave it? How do we not, in a year from now, say, oh, another terrible year? How do we get out of this? I'm so glad to turn the calendar page. How do we get out of that pattern? And, that revolving same thing sort of pattern for this year. There's a few things that we can do. First of all, I would like you to consider to release the idea that this has been the worst year of your life. I know it's a little rough, isn't it? We have evidence that it is the worst year of our life, don't we? I have evidence. But I would like you to consider that it may have been the most monumental, life-changing, spiritually significant year that you have ever lived. Just be with that for a moment. That if you have been doing what we call spiritual work for a period of time, everything that you did up to 2020 was a rehearsal for this year. What you may not know is that on December 31st, Light in the Mountains, we had our 33rd birthday. We have paperwork that shows that that's the day that we were officially incorporated in the state of Idaho as a nonprofit. So we turned 33 a few days ago. And I believe that the first 32 of those years were a rehearsal for this last year. In April, I will have been here as your minister for 19 years. The first 18 was a rehearsal for this last year. And when we talk about our spiritual life, I think sometimes we have this idea of what, gay-needed spirituality would be. I mean, you can never be more spiritual than you are at any given point in time. But we have this idea of what it would be to grow in consciousness or to awaken or to reach nirvana or to have the best meditation you ever had in your life. And we, fantasize about these amazing retreats with teachers in far-off countries and how we're going to elevate off our prayer stools and know God at a deeper level. the way to do that is through 2020. It doesn't matter the color of your prayer cushion or where you go to find a teacher. It doesn't matter. 2020 has been our teacher. And part of the teaching is, rather than to try to discard it, to run away from it as quickly as possible, is, in a sense, learn the lessons of the traffic circle. What do we need to know? Where is this leading us, in a sense? And in this, there is a release that needs to happen, but not in a sense of just a discarding and just running away as quickly as we can. I mean, haven't we all had, I have had dreams over the years where you're running in place away from something and you're not getting anywhere? That's what it's like if you think you can just turn the page to get to another year. Like, oh, it's a 2021, it's over. And of course, we kind of put our hopes on little, great things that are on the horizon. And we think if this happened, life would be great. And we, as humans, do that a lot. If I had a certain job, it would be great. If I, lived in a certain place, it would be great. And of course, now, as we are in our pandemic, the little dangling thing in the future is of course a vaccine, and that is going to be a way for us, I believe, to get to a normal life, whatever normal is again. But we can't say, gee, once everyone's vaccinated, it'll be okay. Because if we haven't done the work of 2020, it'll come up in a different way. We may be over the pandemic, but we won't be over what led us to it. We won't be over what called us forth to have this experience that has been so difficult in 2020. So the first part to be present with it. To really try to understand what has led us here. And to feel and to take in what is happening in our country right now. 350,000 Americans have died this year because of the pandemic. And I think that is a number that is so big that most of us can't wrap our heads around it. That in a sense it is just a number. It's just a statistic that we just throw out there. We don't see the faces, or possibly if it hasn't happened within our own family, we just don't understand it. And that's why I think that there are many people who are denying it's even happening, or that it's way overblown. And I think that's because the number is too horrific. That what would happen if we admitted that something of that magnitude is taking place right now? I mean, it is horrific. And we look at what's going on in our country in politics right now, and all the dissension and things that are happening. And a lot of us, we don't even want to admit that is something we need to face right now. It's too big. It's too difficult. It's too painful. You don't get out of the traffic circle until you're present in the traffic circle. And I think that is our job, not only last year, but for this new year. How do we get out of this? How do we open up to a healing and transformation that has us see this differently? Because I think the other thing that we're sensing right now that is so frightening is that our world is fundamentally changing in a way that we will not go back to a previous state of being. And even though we say, oh gosh, I'm so happy, there's so many things I'd like to let go, but that still scares us because we knew it. We were familiar with it. We seemingly knew how to navigate through it. But I think we all know, again, that once we come out of this pandemic, that our world is going to look quite different. Our jobs are looking quite different. The way that things are organized and formulated in this world is quite different. And that is so scary. So the good news and the bad news is that we can't go back. It's absolutely impossible. I mean, just many of you, like me, probably made coffee this morning. The second you mix those coffee grounds with the water, it was impossible to separate the two. There's no going back. And so that's one of the lessons to learn now. But let's go back to this can be the most amazing experience of our lives if we allow it to be so. So as we talk about letting things go, and especially today to symbolize in our burning bowl ceremony, what is it, in a sense, do we need to let go? No, really. And especially this year, as we have had our burning bowl ceremonies in these last years, it had a feeling to me, a very individual. And yes, we are individuals. But I think we need to up our game a little bit. What do you today want to release and let go as a placeholder for all of us? What do we as a community, and I'm not just talking about our local community here in Idaho, but what as a community do we need to let go in this roundabout that we've got stuck in? And in that, and what is your personal connection to that? In a sense, how have we each individually carried this burden that has gotten us into this mess? And how can we individually give up these burdens today for the group? Because I know that at a certain soul level, we are all connected, and we are all hurting right now. And even the people that that exasperate you, that have opinions completely different than you. The people on TV that you just can't help but throw a shoe at when they come on the television. They are hurting just as deeply as you are. So how do we meet on that level of pain, in a sense, and know that there is a communal release that we need to let go of? And are we brave enough to have this idea without even knowing what does that exactly look like? Found this amazing quote, and I have no idea where it came from. It says, peacemaking doesn't mean passivity. It is the act of interrupting injustice without mirroring injustice. The act of disarming evil without destroying the evildoer. The act of finding a third way that is neither fight or flight, but the careful, arduous pursuit of reconciliation and justice. It is about a revolution of love that is big enough to set both the oppressed and the oppressor free. I think that's the point in this release that we have to be willing to come to. And as I've talked to people over the years, it's so interesting, as I have talked in different ways about letting go and forgiveness and release, and someone will say, I am on board with this, but this one person I just can't let go of. This one conversation I just can't let go of. This one person who hurt me and my family I just can't forgive. This one person in the political realm, I just can't see them in the light and presence of Spirit. That I can see everyone else, but not them. That is where your work is. The person that within you can't include. And again, this doesn't mean that you condone bad behavior. But what it does mean is that you don't separate them within yourself, because as you separate something else, you in fact are separating you. That in your ego, thinking you have elevated yourself, you have in fact done the exact opposite. So this is the time in our history that there's just no excuses anymore. Say, oh, well, I'll get around to it. Or, I really will try to let go of this thing. And this is like this is like where the rubber meets the road. It took what we have done leading us to this point of extreme emergency in the country and the world to kind of wake us up and say, are you ready to let this go now? Does it need to get any worse? Are you willing to do the work now of letting go? Are you? It's not easy. I don't know why sometimes we think the idea of doing spiritual work is just so elevating and so easy and just so inspirational that it just will be just the sky's open, the light comes down. But it's not usually the way that it works. We are being called by Spirit, the universe, to do something amazing right now. I mean, amazing beyond your wildest dreams. Amazing to the point that as we gather around dinner tables and friends and coffee shops 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, we will come back to the conversations of what did you do during that period? How did you transform? What were you willing at that time to give up to make a better world possible? We will talk about this time in history like no other. So the question is, how do you want that conversation to go in 5, 10, 15 years as you meet with friends and family? Do you really want your conversation to say, I was the one that just couldn't let it go? Do you really want to be that person? We have to come together at a very deep way today. So I want to move on to our ceremony. But I almost ran into this. That there's so many things for us to release, but I wanted to do some communal release, just to kind of get some out of the way. I'd like to release for us unkindness. I see so much unkindness in the world right now. I see so much unkindness online. I see people writing things and posting things without any understanding of the hurt, not only that they're causing, but the hurt that they have within themselves. So I would like us to give us up on kindness. I would like us to give up not being willing to honestly face the conflicts within our family and within our communities. We need to learn how to have significant conversations even when we disagree. It can be transforming. I would like us to give up our unwillingness to face our own grief. We're in a time of great loss right now before we come to a time of great gain. But we have to understand where we are. So let's give up our unwillingness. And the last one I have here, let's give up our impatience. We're in a process right now, and we are in consciousness and as a community guiding the speed of this process. Things always happen in time and on time. Amazing things are happening right now. So let's have trust and let's give up our impatience. So, if you may at home, just close your eyes and be close and light your candle right now. If it's not been lit already, have your piece of paper ready. Don't write on it yet. But just in the quietness of your thoughts, as you are fully present in the world right now, in this world that in some ways seems to have lost its mind. How would you like to contribute to its healing? What are you willing now to let go of, not only for yourself, but for the world community? Even if it's frightening, even if it's a little scary, even if it's something that you've taken comfort in, even if it has not even worked for you, what will you let go right now? And let's just be quiet for a few moments. And when you're ready, write one word or one symbol on that piece of paper that you have. And very reverently, with all your heart, all your intention, and all your commitment, set it on the flame and let it go. And those of us who are in this room will do that now. As you watched your paper burn, either slowly or quickly, depending on what you're using, let that be a symbol in your consciousness. You have made a commitment. You've decided not to look back at this, other than to realize it is something that you once held within you and had let go. You feel lighter. You feel easier. And you know that as you walk out of your home today, and each and every day, that you have left this behind. That you are allowing yourself to be transformed and embraced by transformation. That you're taking a stand for a better world, knowing that it has to start with you. So there is nothing else left to do but to give thanks. Give thanks for this miraculous nature of what we are capable to do and to choose. And now we just allow amazing things to happen. And so it is.